What's up, guys? First interview episode with George Youmans, founder, creator of Hiyo. George is such a special guy, has an incredible story of how he started this beverage company. Also, his journey with sobriety. I love this guy. He's one of my best friends in the entire world, and he's so inspirational. I think you're going to really like it. We are live. Awesome office. We're here with George Youmans, the man, the myth, the legend. My best friend in the entire world. George, thanks for being on this show, man.
I figured after 20 years of friendship, I owed this to you.
Yeah, you did owe this to me. So to the audience, I've known George for 20 years, give or take. Feels like it's been that long.
Got to be about that.
I mean, you started high school at 13 years old.
Right.
Because you're such a brainiac. And I was like a year ahead of you. And the friendship started with us playing up the middle at Oaks Christian High School. Shout out to Oaks Lions. And then we've been buds ever since.
Yeah, I mean, you were a friend, but you were more than that. You were really my chauffeur, right?
Because you were the youngest person in the high school, which I was, 16, and I was driving my freshman year because I was so old. No, not actually, but I was a sophomore, so I had my driver's license.
Yeah.
You were a freshman.
And I think you were one of the very few to get the nod from Mama Youmans to drive me around. So then I was continuously pulling on your shirt sleeve. Just, we need to go over this way. We need to go over that way. But I think it did end up working out pretty good because it was like a lot of, I don't know, the same level of obsession that we would get with like morning practices to working out to BP to whatever, just match that energy, and definitely had a little kind of big bro, little bro situation. And now we're here some 20 years later
doing a podcast on Awesome Office, which, by the way, we got to give a shout out to Mama Youmans, one of the best human beings alive. And I'm honestly shocked she let me drive you around in high school.
It's one of her few lapses in judgment. Yeah.
But I do think back at that time of like you and I being in high school and just having this very similar outlook where we both were incredibly hardworking, where I used to pick you up at like 6 o'clock before school and we would go to the field and we would take extra ground balls, or we would go to the weight room. It was...
Dude, I think that there's something really special when, as much as I would love to say that I just have this limitless internal drive, like when you can find someone else's energy that's on the same thing, and like they can push you and pull you into those things that are air quotes like the harder or the challenging things, but you're so stoked to be doing those because you're doing it with someone else and you both feel good about that. That is like, I look back on those times as fondly as any for me. And they were when we were fully pouring ourselves into trying to be great at a sport that we loved. and unfortunately, pulling up a little bit short. We're podcasting, not playing in the MLB, but
But I think that like those characteristics that we instilled at such a young age, they carry over into everything that we do. Like there's a reason why you've been able to be so successful, right? It's like at a young age, like something that was really important to you was hard work. And I think to your point, like who you surround yourself with has such a giant impact on your life and the things that you do. And so it's always being cognizant of, man, is this person like, are they draining my energy, or are they giving me energy? Like, are they helping me become the best version of myself? And I feel like when you meet someone who fills your cup in the best way, which I feel like we've kind of done that for each other over the years of like pushing ourselves to be our best self, whether it's through working out, through being a man of character, through like business, whatever it is. It's that friendship is so important. And I would encourage anyone to kind of take note of the people you have in your life and make sure you're surrounding yourself with like the right folks. It's so cliche, but you are the sum mean of the 5 people you spend your time with.
Yeah. I mean, to give more specificity into like that relationship, Sean is the type of person that will go like on a trip to Australia and he'll turn over and look at me and be like, do you want to hear my code of ethics? And then like he'll just write out like, these are my 30 things. Like I always, and I never. And it's just like, absolutely. I want to hear that. And then it spurs those conversations as we were in like a very small camper van driving down the Gold Coast, and, you know, the 8 hours of driving time ends up just being mostly filled with these things about, you know, the people that we want to become. And, yeah, man, that type of energy, having a place that you can be vulnerable, but also like push yourself to try to get closer towards whatever that version of yourself is that's somewhere close to your potential is such a gift. So, yeah.
I remember that us being in Australia, driving down the Gold Coast, surfing, and just how epic of an adventure that is. To everyone out there, I can't recommend going to Australia enough, or just going on an adventure with a friend, whether that's Costa Rica. I mean, we've surfed in Costa Rica. I've gone to Australia, been to Bali. It's you just create memories that you'll never forget, but then also having these moments of like introspection where you can kind of like think about like, okay, why are we here? Like, how do we become the best versions of ourselves? And to your credit, like I brought up the code, that's not something that I've like actually talked about on this podcast. Maybe Mason, we should do an episode where I share my code. But it's cool that you're just as into that stuff as I am.
Yeah.
And I think you created a code.
Yeah. Yeah, I did. And, I mean, it was fully inspired by what you said. And I just thought like, that's so cool as a, almost like an operating or like my list of rules that just help me navigate through life, where it's like this decision-making tree can become much more simple. And these are the things of like, when I'm of sound mind, writing down and putting a bunch of time towards it, this is the person that I want to be.
Yeah.
And is it a yes or a no? Like for all of these decisions, does it ladder up to that human? Right.
I think it makes decision-making a little bit easier.
Yeah.
Because if you've been intentional with like what you're about and what you're not about. And to the audience, like it basically is a code where it's like, I always do this thing. And like, and the other side of the code is I never do this thing. So an example would be like, I always get up at 6 a.m. That's something that's like really important to me. Or it could be like, I never criticize, condemn, or complain. Like those are two things. So when you find yourself in the category of like, I'm critiquing George for whatever reason, or I'm criticizing George, it's like, nah, I never do that. Like I shouldn't be that guy. And so it kind of helps something that you and I've talked about of like having a true north, right? Like knowing where you're headed and knowing like what you stand for. That's kind of what that code embodies and what that code is all about.
Yeah, and I think that like sometimes people can say that there's a negative to absolutes, right? Of like never and always.
Yeah.
Like life is lived in the gray.
Totally.
But I think there are things that you can say, no, I never do that. And even if you do it sometimes, you're more aware of those times that you do fall short in this code that you're trying to aspire to, you know, continuously live. Right?
Yeah.
So I think it's not to say that like one of mine is I never lie. It's like, okay, it took me a long time to get to a point where if I am lying, like it is so apparent to me and like it kills me. But when I wrote that, it was like, okay, that's something that I aspire to be.
Yeah.
And, you know, over the last 5 years, I think it's gotten to a point where now it's a lot more lived. And yeah.
Well, also too, the ability to share the code with your inner circle, to share the code with like people you love. So it's like, I know something that you hold to be true is you never lie. So if there's ever an instance where I'm like, I don't know if you're being totally honest, I could be like, George, I don't know if that's in your code. And like, it's an accountability partner of like, and there's no judgment in what's a part of your code. It's so personal to you, but in having friends that keep you accountable to that code.
Yeah.
So powerful.
Honestly,
so cool.
I haven't re-examined that. And as an exercise, like it is, maybe this is dorky, but like it's honestly fun. It's like a fun thing to check in with yourself. And it's like, oh, this is actually what I care about. And this is the type of person that I want to be. And how often do you actually take the time to take that inventory?
Yeah.
Right. And maybe, you know, maybe sometimes as you start writing stuff out, it's like, oh, actually, that's not what I believe at all. Like that's actually not that important to me. I thought it was, but maybe it isn't as much. And I think you just do a very good job of making space for those intentional beliefs.
Yeah.
I guess.
The other cool thing about making a code, or I think a few weeks ago I did like the 34 things I've learned in 34 years is
loved it.
You get to, like, this is a moment in time. And it's like when we created our code, when we went to Australia, which now was in 2019, New Year's 2020. So end of 2019, early 2020. We're now coming up on a few years from that. It's like, you get to kind of assess how your code has changed, or like the 34 things I've learned in 34 years. Like, I wonder how much of that is going to be aligned with the 50 things that I've learned in my 50 years.
Yeah.
You can kind of like check in with yourself to see.
I remember like reading your 30, right? And hearing some that I remembered from years back, and then definitely a good amount of those were new. And it's interesting to see even in 4 years how much that can change. And that's why I love, like, I wish I journaled more. Like, I wish I had more discipline in memorializing these moments in time of like, this is how I'm thinking at this moment, because it's so interesting and you learn so much about yourself looking back at, I was journaling a lot when I started Heyo, and it was like, oh, dude, he was so scared, but, or like he had, like, that was such a legitimate concern, or that concern was like wildly off.
Yeah.
Or like, oh, I'm proud of that guy. Like, I'm proud of that dude right there who is like figuring his shit out.
Yeah.
And I think that's, whether it's codes or whether it's just like straight up journaling, like mind dumping at the end of the day, for me, it's really fun to go back and read those things to almost get a snapshot of, or a tour in your mind at that time. Right. And see how much is similar and how much has changed.
I'm curious what, that guy that was about ready to start Hiyo, what was he journaling about?
So I think at that time, I was in a pretty comfortable place in a sales role, that I had been at for a while and could more or less like do it in my sleep, and was feeling very comfortable there, in the role, but very uncomfortable with where I was as a human. Like, I think, there just felt like there was a great disparity between like where I was at and who I wanted to be. Right. And I think I started writing a lot more about, impact and the type of person that I wanted to be. And, I think it just ultimately like laddered up into a level of unfulfillment, or I think that's a word, unfulfilled. And that level of discomfort, I think, can be pretty motivating. Right. So at that point, again, I was in a pretty comfortable sales role. So I was doing that. It was also the pandemic. So you had a little bit more time to just, you're kind of bored, right? Like, it's an active mind, a lot of space to think about things. Right. And, at one of my best friends, Evan, who is my co-founder, he was going to get his MBA at UCLA. And one of his master's thesis was to create a company. And we were kind of like kicking around a few different ideas. I think I had some inspiration from the previous role that I was at, where I was working with and engaging with a lot of founders. And I was really inspired by them, either because like, oh man, that's so cool that they're having that impact, or holy shit, if you can do it, I can do it.
Which is, by the way, that is such a real thing, where you like meet someone and you see the trajectory that they're on and like what they're doing. And a lot of times you come across people that are very inspiring and you're like, gosh, like that's something to shoot for. But then there's moments where you're like, okay, not to toot my own horn, but like if you're pulling this off, like
fully,
that's giving me a little bit of a nudge or a push to be like, I feel like I could do this too.
I hope that, like, frankly, whoever's listening right at this moment probably has a little bit of that level of, if it is in the back of your head of, maybe I should like make a bet on myself. Like, you probably should. If you're feeling that call towards it, not to say to like act brashly and just like lean in and go figure it out, like make a plan and try to do something that you think is going to be fulfilling, because ultimately like the majority of us are probably going to work really hard. Like, I think a lot of people try their best, whatever that is. And that looks different for a lot of people. People work really hard. Most people would say they work hard, right? But a lot of people are probably working on shit that doesn't fill their cup and doesn't give them that like exponential positive thing, whether that is like fulfillment of the impact that you're making or whether it's wealth or whatever you want to say. So I don't know, at that moment, to go back on what that kid was journaling about was like, I want to make an impact and I want to work hard at something that feels like I've got the upside to, maybe this is corny, but like achieve something great, right? As opposed to skate through something comfortable and median.
Yeah. Well said, man. I mean, I feel like the amount of people that probably feel what you just said is very high. And it's the fear of taking the leap. I mean, one of the quotes that you and I hold to be true is the man in the arena.
Yep.
And it's wanting to be that guy or that gal going for it. And whether you're victorious or you're bloodied and marred, at least you're like, okay, I'm taking the leap of faith. And to go back to what you were saying, like you were at a point where you were kind of like ready to take that leap. And Evan comes into your life and he's working on a thesis at UCLA for a company. And I feel like a lot of the stars just kind of aligned where you kept getting green lights, right? Where you're like, ooh, this I feel something here, like I'm going to lean into it. And the more you leaned into it, the more you were kind of getting momentum to creating something that I know speaks to your heart and speaks to your character with Hiyo.
Yeah. I mean, that was probably one of the most powerful moments in my life that I just felt momentum, right? Like the feeling of that space that you sit in where you're like, oh, what should I do? It sucks. Like it's a point where it's all limitless potential and it feels so far away and it feels like, how do I get started? And then once you actually start putting pen to paper, like in my experience, it felt like all of these things just came out of the woodwork of like the universe saying like, keep going or pushing me forward. Like, you know, we were lucky enough to have another really close friend of ours, Signy, who's like an amazing graphic designer who's like, yeah, no, I'll do like all of this for free. And it's just like, okay, great. Cause we have no money. Like perfect. I love that. And then, you know, at UCLA, we had such a great community of really great advisors and professors who were helping Evan. Like, these are the things that you need to solve. And then it was like, okay, we'll just go do that. And then we were able to do a pitch competition there and we won $40K. And that was like, in addition to my life savings and Evan's life savings, like that was what launched the company. And I don't know, it's not to say that there aren't a bunch of challenges or like roadblocks that happen throughout it, but it just felt like, I don't know, people are really quick to want to support you and want to help someone who they can see is working their ass off and trying to chase something special. Like, and that is such a powerful, motivating thing that, you know, Heyo is a sum of that community, coming together and rallying around us and supporting us.
Yeah.
In whatever big or small ways.
So going back to the earlier days, you didn't go full-time right away. Evan's at UCLA going to school. You're still working your job, feeling as if you feel you need to lean into whatever this is. What was kind of the point in time where you're like, I'm going full-time into Hiyo and starting this company?
Yeah. So,
and do you recommend that people kind of work on, like if they have a job right now, right, and they're doing well, like should it be a side project? Because you kind of like,
yeah, so
we're dabbling in both and then you went fully all in.
Yeah. I mean, I think that like to try to write a prescription for everyone is probably a fool's errand. Like it's a little bit tough. Like for me, it was, I'm going to moonlight this and I'm going to do my day job. And then at night, like my life is going to be Hiyo until I fall asleep. And I'm going to pour as much, like from a time perspective, I was probably working full time on Hiyo at that moment because it was, you know, from 6 to like 2 a.m. or something, right? Like we were really pouring ourselves into this. But I think that for me, it was, let's make sure that we have something viable let's make sure that we have a really good chance. And like, I'm not afraid of a risk, but let's not be stupid. Let's ensure that we have a great chance for success. At the time it was also like, okay, now's a good time for me. I don't have a family. I don't have that much responsibilities. Like worst case scenario, like I'll, crash on somebody's couch or move back home with the rents, or again, shout out to Mama Youmans.
We got to do a shout out to Kenwood too.
Yeah.
Another studly human being.
But it was like, yeah, man, if not now, when? And I think that the point where it fully switched, like I knew that I was going to go full time, by January 1 of 2021. Yeah. I knew that was going to happen. And then thankfully we won that competition. So we had a little bit of money to like have our very meager salaries, to just ensure that like, I could continue to live, and pay rent. Right. So I think that moment was really one where it felt like, okay, I can see the vision. I think we have a good chance here. All right, I'm all in. And then we didn't launch for another 6 months.
Because you were creating the concoction. And for the audience that doesn't know, so George is co-founder of Hiyo, which is a beverage company. It's I'll let you say it, but it's an alcohol alternative beverage.
Yeah. So our whole concept, we're trying to create a stress relieving, mood boosting beverage that people can drink in the same occasions as alcohol, but and kind of have a similar feeling. But instead of having that come from alcohol, it comes from like healthy, functional ingredients that don't lend themselves to abuse, and just trying to support ultimately like a healthier lifestyle. So yeah, that was the whole concept that we were working on. It was, it's well timed after the back half of the pandemic, where I think a lot of people maybe overconsumed a little bit, myself included. And I think my own sobriety and seeing some of my family members that, really suffered from overconsumption of alcohol was a big inspiration. So I think that, in talking about inspiration can come in many forms, and maybe it's not always like, like a very inspiring clip on the internet. Sometimes it can be like a really shitty experience that like hurts you to your core. And like that can be the inspiration for something hopefully good and productive. And like, in my case, that was a low where I had a family member hospitalized with some alcohol related stuff. And now 2.5 years later, like the company is doing really well and I feel extremely fulfilled in what I'm doing. And that was very much a catalyst for the product that I wanted to make and the impact that I wanted to have. So, I think it's going back to what we said about giving ourselves the space to almost take in the world that's happening around us and giving ourselves the space to know what we're thinking about. As you do that, like, inspiration can kind of come in those moments. And especially if you've been looking to try to find greater fulfillment or find what it is that you want to be spending so many of your waking hours doing. I don't know, if you give yourself space to think about it, sometimes it starts to just percolate to the top.
Yeah, it's incredible that you started a company that you were passionate about, that kind of spoke to your heart. You're doing it with one of your best friends. But on top of that, I feel like your timing is just could not be better. I feel like over the last year to 2 years, I've learned so much about the negative effects of alcohol, where I'm actually trying to limit the amount of alcohol I consume, just because Huberman, someone I follow, you follow all these doctors and you're like, gosh, there's so many just downfalls of consuming alcohol. And so I feel like our generation is starting to realize how toxic it can be if you don't have a good relationship with it, and how beneficial it is to limit the amount of alcohol you have.
Yeah.
And so for myself, I'm really trying to drink less. And I don't think I think I'm in more of the norm, actually, where a lot of our friends are kind of trying to consume less alcohol. So you guys are kind of timing it perfectly.
Well, yeah. I mean, if one of the big things that we say over at Hiyo is like, I'm not trying to yuck anybody's yum, right? Like I don't want to demonize.
By the way, one of my favorite sayings of all time. Did you like come up with that? Did you create that?
No, definitely not.
Well, you might as well, because the only person I've ever heard say that is you. And I feel like it's such a good saying, like, don't yuck my yum, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's just like I don't want to come at this of like trying to wag the finger and tell people like demonizing alcohol and saying like, you know, if you drink this, like, what are you doing? Right. Like, I don't think that that's the best way to encourage or invite people into a new consumption behavior, especially one as ingrained as alcohol consumption that like in our society, it's been around since people were writing on tablets. Right. So, I think our approach is more so the idea of like, okay, if you were to go into a room and you ask like 100 people, all right, who wants to go sober? Never drink again in your life. Like maybe 1 or 2 people will raise their hand. And if you go in and say like, yeah, hey, who can maybe drink a little bit less, right? I think damn near everyone's hand will rise up there. And that was our concept where it was like, I don't want to tell you that you have to change your identity and make this massive life shift. I just want to make it easier for you to drink a little bit less, whatever that means to you, and kind of meet you where you're at. And then hopefully, if my experience is one that's shared by other people, you start to feel those benefits of moderating your consumption, or in my case, like taking it completely out. Like that's been something that, I don't know, I guess we correctly identified that would be something that would resonate with a lot of people. Whether that's because we live in a greater information age where people's eyes are wide open with the positive and negative effects of everything they consume, you know? And I think alcohol is kind of in the limelight a little bit of, you know, trusted voices saying the deleterious effects.
When you decided to go sober, what were some of the struggles and what were some of the benefits? Like, what did you notice after, like the first month, what was it like for you? And then after that, was there like, man, did you like yourself 3 months later? Like, what were the pros and cons?
Pros and cons of that. Well, I think the cons are it's like inconvenient. And I know that sounds like a weird way to describe it, but you have to be so much more intentional with your time. Otherwise you're going to be bored as shit. Like, it's like the default for so many people during the weekend is just like, yeah, no, let's go grab a beer or whatever. Yeah. And like, that's fun enough because frankly, alcohol is a rewarding substance. Right. And you know, if you're not going to do that, just going to a bar and like sardining yourself into some packed place and waiting for a long time to buy an overpriced drink, even if it's non-alcoholic, like it's not that much fun. So you got to get more creative with the time that, like how you're spending your time. I think one of the biggest things was like, you know, if you're going to take something out of your life, like be conscientious about like what you're putting in it. Right. So for me, it lined up with Heyo. So I was like, okay, I'm going to work so hard on this and I'm never going to have an off day because I'm never going to be hungover.
Yeah. That's such a real thing.
And like speaking back to momentum, right? Like, dude, it would drive me freaking crazy where, you know, I think we were even living together at this time where it'd be like Monday to Friday, so healthy, working my ass off, like going to the gym, feeling like all of this positive momentum. And then I just blow off steam on the weekend and then feel like hungover as all hell on Sunday. And then even in Monday and Tuesday, I'd be like kind of groggy, almost shaking that off. And I think one of the most positive things that I started to see was the pride that I had in making that more challenging decision on a day-to-day basis started to lead to a much kinder self-talk internally that then it was like, yeah, you do deserve success, or you do deserve to feel good and motivated. And that was huge for me as someone who, whether I like it or not, just have always been like pretty hard on myself. It was really positive. Yeah. And really, really empowering, frankly. And I was about to say, like, I don't think I am 100% confident that Hiyo would not be where it is today if I didn't make that decision. And I don't think it would be even close, frankly.
Yeah, the momentum you have from not having a distraction or not having something that like chemically gets you off your game. Where it's, to your point, it's like, okay, you're healthy Monday through Friday or Monday through Thursday. And then weekends you're drinking, and then you're feeling hungover. And then, as we know, the hangover lasts for not just a day, but a few days.
Well, especially as you get older, man. It's like
it
you used
lasts.
to be able to just have like a Powerade and a Sprite and like the D Hall and like I'm ready to rock and roll. And then now it's like, okay, I need a dark room, air conditioning. I'm going to order 3 different like Uber Eats and I'm going to turn off my phone.
But then you're just disappointed with yourself.
Totally.
Yeah. So
you're like living like a cave person. It's just, yeah.
Was it socially hard for you?
Yeah, but I was lucky enough to have an extremely supportive community around me. So yes, because I think a lot of the people that I still hung out with, like I didn't change who I hung out with at all for the most part. So, I've got in some cases like 10 years of history with people drinking and like college buddies.
Throwing it back at the lads.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's like, what? Youmans isn't drinking? Like, haha, like, what are you talking about? And it's like, no, man, I don't drink. And it's like, well, I have 10 years of experience saying that that's not true. And it's like, I don't drink anymore. That was like an uncomfortable thing for, I think, a lot of people to start. And sometimes like sobriety can look like a mirror for some people. And then if they're at all uncomfortable with their own drinking, then my presence makes them feel worse, which sucks. Like that's I don't know. It's just a part of it. I felt, but I think the flip side was it also inspired a lot of people to try to be more moderate and drink less and showed that, I was still going out and like, I refused to go to home like early too. So I think maybe that's just like the unnecessarily competitive person in me that it's like, I will not be a wet blanket. I do not care. I will not have a sip, but I'm going to I will not leave this dance floor before you.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, what we were talking about earlier, George, like you are the company you keep. So like you and I spend so much time together, but like, we would go grab a beer or have a glass of wine. And then when you decided to go sober, it was like, I didn't really want to drink, like if you're not drinking, I'm not gonna have a drink. And so you were rubbing off on me in a very positive way. Whereas we were getting more creative on the way we were spending our time, whether that was working out or going on an adventure, or talking, thinking big, and what do we want to do in life? What we want to do business wise? It creates a lot more space.
Yeah. I mean, it's like that. Okay. So that's a perfect example, right? Like, okay, you can talk about kind of bullshit if you're over a beer and it's just like, like that was still fun, right? If you're talking about bullshit and you're completely sober with a friend on a Friday night, like that's not that much fun. But if you're giving yourself the space to be like, all right, I'm sober and I'm going to be with my friend, like, let's talk about dream convos of where we want to be in 5 years and then like map that out almost.
Yeah.
You have to fill whatever you're taking out with something better. Like that's again, what I'm talking about. And,
you also need to change up the routine.
Yeah.
How often do you just like, let's go grab a beer, let's go to the bar, whatever it is, where now you're like, okay, I'm not really drinking. So you need to start doing things that you probably weren't doing prior, which creates a lot of new experiences.
Definitely.
Which is super cool.
Definitely.
Yeah. I remember when you went sober, I felt like every morning you were getting up and you were crushing golf.
Dude, honestly,
you were like Heyo, and your golf game went from like, you've always been an incredible golfer, but like I feel like that's when you became a scratch golfer. Was basically when you went sober.
Yeah, no, it's funny. Like I went sober and got to like a plus for a little bit, and then Heyo started ruining my golf game because it was focusing on Heyo too much. Appropriately.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know. You start to then appreciate things in a different light. So I really started to appreciate those early morning, cold mornings of golf with like dew on the grass. Like it became almost this religious thing for me. And it was like, okay, you earned this by not drinking the night before. You earned to feel good during this sunrise, taking this in and playing golf with, your dad or whomever. this was earned by not drinking the night before and like sullying that experience. And it's weird, but these are the stories that you end up telling yourselves.
Yeah.
And like, that's what I think all of our experience is. It's like the stories that you tell yourself. And that one for me was like, it became something that I continued to strive for and like really appreciated those early rounds, because it meant you wouldn't have been able to do this if you drank the night before, or maybe you would have been it, but
you'd be in a different headspace.
You definitely would have been in a different headspace and probably would have been just struggling to stand up. Right. So,
Well, what that did is that created a positive headspace, right? Where you could be proud of yourself for teeing off at 6 a.m. Whereas when you were drinking, maybe you're still teeing off at 6 a.m., but you were in a completely different headspace. And that was probably, to your point earlier, is a little bit more negative.
Right. And I mean, look, like you think about like just at face value, going golfing like isn't a big accomplishment, right? But in the space, in the context of that, it was like going golfing on those early mornings that sometimes and oftentimes it was with my dad, like getting to have that experience with him where I wasn't like nursing a hangover, or I was actually making it and like not canceling on him last minute or something like that. Like that became something that I was really proud of. And I really started to enjoy, like I said, almost in a religious way. Like it became something that was sacred to me.
Well, you started also being more of a man of your word, right? When we have our big nights, or if you had a big night, like you're much more prone to kind of tap out because you're not in the right headspace. But you all of a sudden like make a commitment and you see it through. Yeah. You just start to become a different person. Like,
yeah, I mean, like I don't try to become preachy or like push not drinking on people, but I think if you are at all curious about it, it's like cutting it out a little bit more and just seeing if there are positive effects is absolutely a worthy experiment. Like at the very least, it's something that you should check out and just see like, does that work for me? Like, okay, what were the things that I noticed because of that? And I think most of my friends who have either done that because I've like encouraged them to, or maybe they just wanted to do it themselves, like they report back that that's a pretty resounding yes.
Yeah, I mean, I just being around you talking about it, to me, it's like a bit of a no-brainer that it alcohol, in my opinion, can enhance certain experiences if you have a healthy relationship with it, right? There's a time and a place for it. I also see that there's such benefit if you're someone who struggles with it, or you're just trying to, I feel like the theme of this podcast is just catching momentum, and you're like, I don't want to be in a lull. I don't want to have setbacks. It's cutting things out that kind of hinder your performance or hinder your momentum forward. If alcohol is that thing for you, which I've never really struggled with alcohol, but I can definitely acknowledge that it's gotten in the way of things that I've wanted to do. To your point earlier, like you sometimes have 0 days. Or it's like if you're someone who wants to squeeze the juice out of life, right, every day, alcohol can sometimes get in the way of that. Yeah. It can contribute in a really positive way, but it also can like really hurt you if you don't have good boundaries with it.
Yeah, and one of the biggest learnings that I think I had is oftentimes I think that we can somewhat utilize alcohol or whatever. Like there's a lot of different things that we can do that can kind of numb ourselves or anesthetize like a portion of our life that we don't want to address. And then you just have this nagging thing that's in the back of your head or in your subconscious that you're not addressing. And you're almost like continuing to like push that down. And one of the things that was so freaking hard about sobriety was like, all right, I got nowhere to go. It's me and my mind. And like, I don't have anything to do to like fully state change. Like you can kind of go for runs and like ice baths and things like that. But like realistically, you kind of are stuck with the man between your temples. And like, if you're not stoked in life, like on where you're at in life, it becomes much more apparent. And that can be really uncomfortable, but it can also be illuminating where it's like, yeah, I need to address this component, or I need to I need to be a better man of my word, or I need to stop just toiling away hours and hours at this job that is moving me towards something that is beneath what I believe my potential to be. Like, that becomes much more apparent. And that's not like the only way that you can figure that out is through sobriety. It's not true at all.
But for you, that was your journey.
But for me, like, that was one of the illuminating moments that was really hard, was really uncomfortable, and very impactful.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really cool because it set you up to be here today.
Yeah.
Right? That you making that decision to go sober and to lean into Hiyo, which represented, it was, something you struggled with. It represents the opposite of that. You could lean into it in a really meaningful way. And here we are having a discussion of like that initial decision that you made to cut this out gave you the headspace to lean into something that's, to your credit, you're changing the way people consume their beverages. And then also it's Hiyo's changed your life because of that decision you made to go sober.
Yeah.
So that was kind of where George was at in those early days of journaling, of working through all of this, right? Trying to figure out like, how do I get rid of this demon that was kind of holding you back?
Yeah.
Right. And so you made the decision of, okay, I'm going to get rid of this, and I'm going to just today I'm not going to drink. Get through the day. Today I'm not going to drink. It's just every day. I'm taking it day by day, and then that creates momentum, right?
Yeah.
And then now you're leaning into Hiyo full time. You've won at UCLA. You got the $4,000 or the $40,000 grant, like you said. You and Evan put your life savings in. You're trying to come up with a concoction of what tastes good, right? Because everyone has different like tastes of what they're looking for. By the way, if you haven't tried Hiyo, it's incredible. It's like one of my favorite beverages for sure. There's a lot of other beverages I like too.
Dr. Pepper is a delicious
beverage. My gosh.
There's no denying that.
Yeah, you're a big Dr. Pepper guy. I'm not a big Dr. Pepper guy. I've been getting into Diet Coke, which
I hate.
Yeah.
I hate that for you.
Yeah, I don't mind it.
Well, no,
I don't really drink soda that often, but if I am, I'm probably going to drink it at DC.
But if you're feeling a bit naughty, I'm just feeling really naughty, I'm going to have myself a little DC.
So going back to creating the concoction, right? And one of the questions I have for you is, I feel something on Hiyo, but not everyone feels something on Hiyo. Mm-hmm. You call it the float.
Yeah.
Is there any like, why do certain people feel it and other people don't?
So the main things that cause the float that you're talking about, this kind of like stress relieving, mood boosting feeling, is coming from adaptogens and nootropics. And adaptogens, as the name suggests, adapt to different people. So, the ingredients that we have are like ashwagandha, L-theanine, lion's mane, cordyceps, ginger, turmeric. That's kind of the 6 different functional ingredients in each can of Hiyo. And, something like ashwagandha is an adaptogen that is basically working to regulate your cortisol levels in your brain. So cortisol is a chemical that's released kind of like the fight or flight chemical that is tied with stress. And from a evolutionary perspective, really great for human beings to avoid, snakes in the grass and lions in the trees and whatever. But now it's like we're fighting our laptops because an email comes in and it's like, we're actually not in like danger here. So our cortisol is maybe like a little bit overactive. And I think adaptogens like ashwagandha can help reduce that stress. So for some people who are maybe like super even keeled and not stressed at all, maybe they don't feel that as much. But for someone who is, and maybe a little bit more high strung like myself, I definitely feel it. And that in concert with L-theanine, which is another kind of calming focus, nootropic that ours comes from organic green tea leaves. Just another kind of wonder molecule in my mind that just helps give calm. And that feeling of calm focus is such a, I don't know, it can be really enjoyable and almost like euphoric. Lion's mane is, a cognitive enhancer almost. It's just like your brain's best friend. It's so good for cognitive function. Also just a beautiful mushroom if you've never seen it.
I've never seen it. No. I do feel like it's like an upper, but also like it calms you.
Yeah. And the upper was like, so we use cordyceps, which cordyceps mushrooms are supposed to almost help your lungs work a bit more efficiently to transport more oxygenated blood to your extremities. So, like that feeling of almost like a runner's high, it's like cordyceps is supposed to help with that. Like cordyceps is getting very popular in the endurance community. So we wanted to use that instead of caffeine because we didn't want people like drinking Hiyo at 5 or 6 or 8 p.m. and then feeling caffeinated and then not having a good night's sleep and then waking up not well rested. And it's like, oh, shit, this is a new version of a hangover. Like, what are we doing here? We're trading one in for another. So that was why we used cordyceps to help with that. And then ginger and turmeric almost are like the anti-hangover, like the exact opposite of it, like aid with digestion and reduce inflammation because inflammation is the worst and it's killing all of us. So
do you wish we had Hiyo when we were doing the marathon?
Yeah, absolutely.
Would we have run faster?
Ran faster, jumped higher. My time would have been cut in half.
So, George and I did the LA Marathon back in 2018, I think it was.
I think so.
And George had never run more than 2 miles, and you decided to. I convinced you to sign up for the LA Marathon six weeks prior.
Yeah.
And we finished.
Yeah,
which was one of the cooler experiences of my life.
Dude, of moments in my life where I think we all go through these little ricochets where we like bounce off certain people or moments that kind of put our lives in different trajectories. And that moment of Sean hitting me up where I was in truly like one of the lows of my life, like very unhappy, out of college, job that I was not stoked on. Was having some girl troubles, like just not in a great situation. And Sean just happened to reach out. We hadn't talked for a while too, which was like very interesting. And just said like in the most Sean Spear way, like, do you want to do the LA Marathon? And I was like, no, like running is miserable and I've never run more than 2 miles in my life. And you just kind of like kept on it and kept pushing me and just were like, look, if you can do 6 miles, like if you can go out and run 6 miles today, you can do it. Like, because I think I was trying to give like all of the excuses for why I couldn't, right? It's like, oh, it's so close. Like I haven't practiced, like I haven't trained right. Like we won't pull it off. And you said that, and then I went out and I remember running like down to the pier and back, and did it. I was like, all right, we're doing this. Yeah, and then that was like truly one of the most proud moments of my life, not because, it's this massive accomplishment, but because it was like, it pulled me out of a period where talking about momentum, it was going the wrong way.
Yeah.
Like it was just this downward spiral. So yeah.
Sometimes you just need a friend to give you a little nudge. And I found,
if little nudges from Sean are like knocking you over the head with a cinder block. But yeah.
No, I found this for myself where whenever I'm just in a funk or going through a tough season, one of the best things I can do is put something to look forward to, something kind of hard on the schedule or on the calendar. And for me, I just knew you and I've always bonded over sports.
Yeah.
And having the camaraderie of spending time training together and every day getting a little bit better. And I just knew the end result would be us crossing the finish line. And I had done it before and I knew what it meant to me. And I knew if you showed up every day, which I knew you would, you just needed a little bit of a push. I realized like I fully was aware of what that would do for you internally.
Yeah.
And it's just little wins every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's going back to what we talked about at the beginning of this, like doing challenging things with the right people. It is challenging, but it's like, it's so enjoyable.
It's so enjoyable.
Like it doesn't feel the same. And I think if you're lucky enough to be able to have that type of community where you can try to accomplish something that would be considered challenging and you get to do it with people that you care about, like that's That's the gold standard. Like that's the good stuff.
Yeah.
Right there.
Have we ever talked about the type 1, type 2 happiness? Have you and I ever gone into that? So I heard this before. I thought it was so cool. There's type 1 happiness and there's type 2. Type 1 happiness might be going out with your friends and hitting the bar, or it's like instant gratification pleasure, right? Like you're at a party, or you eat like some cake, whatever it is. It's there's not a lot of like effort that you need to put into getting the pleasure of whatever that is, right? That's type 1. Type 2 happiness is when you're doing the thing, it's actually not enjoyable at all until you accomplish whatever you set out to do. And then that gives you happiness from the accomplishment. So type 2 would be you and I 6 months prior to running the LA Marathon, committing to do the marathon. The training was not fun, right? We made the most of it because it was enjoyable kind of being, I know we had fun together, but like running, call it 16, 18 miles on a Saturday morning. Like there's more fun things to do, right?
Definitely.
But where you get an insane amount of happiness is seeing that thing through, right? Like crossing the finish line. And then you have that happiness as like something that like, okay, I did that. Like I was able to achieve that goal, and that they've proven that actually lasts a lot longer than the type 1.
Well, I would think that, if that's the good one to go for, like,
I wouldn't say there's the good or a bad. They're just different. It's understanding both and like what you prefer to lean into.
Sure. I guess though, like if I were to say which one you would like is achieving nirvana almost, is like doing the type 2 and finding a way to enjoy like the journey of that, right? Like having enough time, and I'll liken it back to Hiyo, where it's like most of my days are dealing with very large problems of things that are more or less out of my control and just trying my best to solve them, again, with people that I care about, and I enjoy doing that. Like, but if you look at the day to day, it's like, dude, you're sitting in Excel spreadsheets a lot, and you're like dealing with partners who are letting you down, and like it's not quote unquote fun. But if you can look at that as, almost those like earning it moments, right? Like that's one of the things that we'll say over here. It's like every time that just shit hits the fan, it's like, all right, when this goes well, and in a couple years, we're looking back and got a household brand and we've impacted all these lives. Like no one will be able to say like that got handed to you.
Yeah.
You earned that. And that kind of stuff of trying to enjoy the journey of it is so important, because you think about like just from a mathematical equation, right? Like think about your life, how much is going to be spent in the accomplishment, like in that moment, right? There's going to be all these little things, but there's going to be so much more time leading up to it, and how you deal with it after you accomplish something, right? So if you're just like sacrificing and like, martyring yourself to achieve some thing that's out in the distance, like that's never made sense to me, actually. Like I think if you can't enjoy the journey, and if you can't find the way that it's like, I don't even know if like happiness should be here. It shouldn't just be something that's out further away and like can only be achieved if you unlock something. So I don't know if there's like a hard point in that, but I've never subscribed to the notion that like, the delayed gratification is, sure, it's something to like work towards, but I think you need to be able to have some level of gratification throughout the process.
Yeah. And I think having a level of gratification throughout the process, it comes down to a few different things. It's number one, knowing what your true north is, like knowing what you want to accomplish and being very clear on that.
Dude, totally.
And then number two being your ability to change your perspective, right? Because you could think about you doing Excel all day, or your vendors just dropping the ball. And it's like, all right, we're earning it today, right? You having that type of perspective on it versus like, this sucks, I hate it. I think
perception is everything.
Yeah.
is everything. And it's the thing that we
credit to
always
you
have control.
to credit to you and like to the culture here that like you've been able to cultivate the right perspective. Because I feel like if you go the opposite direction, you get to choose like how you view things. Like I always say this, like feedback is neutral. It's like you could say something to me, it's completely neutral. I'm going to decide whether it's positive or negative, right? Like these moments that you're having with Hiyo, you're choosing the perspective, you're choosing the lens to view it through.
Yeah. I mean, that's the idea of like moving the locus of control of your life internal, right? Where it's like, if you constantly think about like your life is happening to you and like, oh, woe is me, this shit happened to me, or like this great thing happened to me, and it's all like this external thing, that can make you feel like you're almost like just in the wind, right? But if you have that level of ownership where like, even if things are going poorly, let's say a vendor misses a PO, right? Like they miss that timing. All right, how is that my fault? What did I do that allowed that to happen? And how can I ensure that doesn't happen in the future? That to me is such a dramatically more pragmatic and productive thought process. And in the same way, like the power of perspective is everything as well, right? Like that's something that you always have control over. You don't always have control over what happens to you in your life, but you do always have, to a degree, I think, always, you have the ability to decide how that affects you. And I think, especially in entrepreneurship, there's going to be a lot of things that give you a very good excuse, a completely legitimate and like almost indefensibly strong case that's bad luck and that's tough and you deserve to be able to complain about that. And that sucks. But if you're going to be successful, it's almost never listening to that voice or feeding that wolf.
Yeah.
Right.
Ooh, I like that. Feeding that wolf.
You know, like,
yeah, that's
I don't
good.
remember where that's from, but like, there's like two wolves in you, which one you feed, you know? Right. And
I check myself on that all the time. It's like, what wolf am I feeding?
Yeah.
Am I feeding like, I mean, there's two wolves, right? Like what, do you know what the saying is?
I wish I could say it more.
It's something along the lines of like, you have two wolves on your shoulder. One wolf is, I guess it's like one's positive and one's negative is the way I break it down. And you get to choose kind of what wolf you feed. But as I was hearing you say all of that, it's something that like I hold to be true of just not allowing myself to be a victim.
Yeah. And
I don't know if I have a better terminology than just going on the offensive, where it's like not letting things happen to me. It's things happen for me. So I think having that perspective on a lot of things, I got to give credit to a friend of mine who's much older and wiser. And he was telling me a story of an adventure he went on with his family, and just about everything went wrong. And his family's like crying and everyone's so upset. And he was like, no guys, this is when it gets good. It's this mindset of like changing your perspective of like, ooh, this is when it gets good, you know? Cause it's like, sometimes it's really nice when things go easy, go super easy and smooth. But like a lot of great stories are when like kind of stuff hits the fan and it doesn't go as you planned. And you can sit there and you can cry about it and you can like be really upset, or you can be like, oh no, this is when it gets good. This is when I'm going to have to like lean on my intuition. This is when I'm going to have to get creative. I'm going to have to think outside of the box. And having that perspective, especially as an entrepreneur, I think that's a little bit of an X factor with the people that I see that are ultra successful, is their ability to kind of, they talk about this with Steve Jobs, the reality distortion, right? I don't like that because it's like reality distortion is this idea of like, you know, this table is brown and you're saying it's red. And it's like, that's not true, but it is a little bit of like, I'm going to change the lens that I see this in, and I'm going to try to make sure that this like serves me and it doesn't bring me down.
Yeah.
And I feel like if you have that as a leader, as an entrepreneur, it's going to make such a difference in your company. But then it comes from the top and things kind of trickle down, is that starts to be the culture of the company.
Well, I would argue that like it's not just like an X factor. It's like, it's critical.
Yeah.
Like I don't think there's anyone.
No, but I think there's founders that don't have that, George. Like I meet people that.
Are they still around? Like, is their business still going? Like, I don't know how you do that. I'm not trying to like talk shit. Like I genuinely think that if you if you don't have that type of mindset that is always able to like look at things as like, how is this happening for me? What can I do here? Like what is in my control and how can I make this something that's positive? I just don't know how you could do it. Based on my experience, I don't know how you could do that if you don't have that type of thought process, because every opportunity for something to go wrong, like it frankly does. It does so much. It does so much when you are, even when you're trying your best, and especially when you're going out and like, you don't know what you're doing. Like for me, I'm a first-time founder. Like I don't have this wealth of experience and knowledge to fall back upon. All I have is, these principles and ideas of like how to think and how to react to problems. And then just saying like, I'm going to try my best to minimize that issue and maximize like the gain, or try to focus on the biggest things that are going to make the largest impact here. And that's all that I have. So without that, like, I feel like you'd be up shit's creek if you're getting like thrown off your game every time shit goes awry.
It's tough, man. Tough to be successful, to your point.
I think so.
Also, I wish more people had that, to be honest with you, George.
So, all right. So think about that. It's tough to be successful. I'd almost argue it's tougher to be like not successful if you want to be successful. Like it's tougher if you're working at something that you don't feel fulfilled and you have to deal with that on a day-to-day basis and you don't feel recognition for the hard work that you're putting in, or maybe you're not even putting in hard work and you're giving your time to this thing that isn't filling your cup. Like that's hard.
Yeah.
That sucks. It's hard to be a good person or like a happy person or what, like a good partner, a good mate, like a good friend in that experience.
Totally.
I think that's really hard.
Well, I think that's why so many people lean into things that they probably shouldn't, right? Like where they're leaning into video games, or they're leaning into drinking, or like they're leaning into high dopamine food. Like there's a lot of people that I don't think have that mindset, and they don't take the leap of faith.
But that's hard, right? Like
no, I'm agreeing with you. That
right?
is a very hard life, but like I think that is pretty close to hell to me.
Yeah.
It's an internal hell. And you have the ability to change it. That's like the coolest part about this whole thing is like, you might be falling into that trap of like, I hate my 9 to 5. I don't feel like I'm pursuing my calling, or like, I don't love what I'm doing. It's not filling my cup, which is totally fine. But then on top of that, you're going home and you're not working out. Maybe you're playing video games, or you're just binge watching Netflix, or you're eating fast food. Like that, habits compound on themselves, right? Like that starts to get bad fast. But the great thing is having enough self-awareness to know where your train or your boat is headed to self-correct, and to be like, mindset is an intentional decision that you can make, right? Like you can change your mindset, you can change your perspective, and you can self-correct and go in a different direction, and you can start hanging out with different people. You can start associating with people that want to be into health and wellness, and you start going to the gym 1 day a week or 2 days a week. And then all of a sudden after 2-3 weeks, you're like, man, I'm getting a little stronger. I'm starting to see some definition in my bicep. And then that like creates momentum, and you're like starting to go 3-4 times a week, and you're like meeting friends, and then those friends are keeping you accountable. And then all of a sudden you've changed in one aspect of your life, and then that starts to carry over in other aspects of your life. And then you've completely shifted as a human being. You're a different human being a few months later, just because of one mindset shift or one habit shift.
Yeah. I mean, dude, it's kind of like life is going to be hard if you're successful or you're not. So like you might as well like go for it.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's going to be hard in a way that you're going to have to deal with the fact that, there's a big disparity between the person that you want to be and who you are. And like, that's going to come in a various, like a full flurry of negative ways, or you can try to be successful and like bet on yourself and feel good about that when your head hits the pillow.
Yeah.
and deal with all of those challenges that is going to undoubtedly arise as you're doing that.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, okay, I'm not getting out easy. Like I will not get out of this easy. So I might as well do the one that like feels good and feels fulfilling and like moves me forward.
Yeah.
Right. And yeah.
Also knowing that the system is a little rigged against you. Like being aware that like here we're having this podcast and your phone's going off, that like people are paid, these companies are paid billions of dollars or making billions of dollars to take our attention constantly. Yeah. And so knowing, like being very aware where you're like, you understand a bit more of the matrix, you know, you understand of like, okay, like video games, like they're going to create dopamine where you're going to get addicted to it. And there's nothing wrong with playing video games. It's just like you got to have like boundaries, right? You got to have like moderation. Drinking. Yeah. It's understanding that like you watch a football game and it's like the commercials are like people drinking beer, and it's like alcohol is fine within moderation, but things are being thrown at you through advertisements or what have you, where they're trying to push all this stuff onto you because it's a consumer society. And so like they want you to buy these things, but that doesn't, you got to be aware that like that's not going to help you get to where you want to go.
Yeah. I mean, that's going back to, I think, the beginning of this conversation of like writing down your code and figuring out like true north and having the space to not go for like the little dopamine hit of like whatever's on Twitter or Reels or TikTok or whatever, and saying like, okay, where am I at? What am I thinking about? And what matters to me right now?
Yeah. And
how am I tracking towards whatever that capital T truth is again?
And understanding life is going to be hard. No matter what route you go, it's going to be hard. You just get to pick, like what type of hardship that you have.
To a degree, absolutely.
To a degree, but I guess what I'm getting at is like, to me, working a 9 to 5 that I hate, eating food I shouldn't eat, not working out, being addicted to the television, maybe not having great relationships is a much harder hardship than getting up, going to go work out before the office, tackling my work where I feel like, okay, I'm doing a great job at work, going home, going for a walk, having good relationships with people. Like one of the quotes I think about all the time is like, success is not an entitlement. Like you have to earn it. And I think you have to earn almost all things in life. Like it's not going to come easy. There's no shortcuts. And so you get to kind of pick like what type of route you want to go in life, because at the end, like it's all going to be hard. And it's what type of hardship that do you want? Like, what are we doing? You know?
Yeah. And then hopefully you select some awesome people to go into it with you and support you through it. And then you get to enjoy it a little bit.
Yeah. Well, also like the working out is like really hard the first few weeks. And then all of a sudden you start really enjoying it and you start craving it. You know, it's like to my example earlier is like your body is transforming. Like that's type 2 happiness. Like you're seeing like, wow, some definition like in my abs or in my arms, whatever it is. Like it goes from it being miserable and super hard to like now all of a sudden it being like hard, but it's a good hard. Yeah. And you start like actually like craving it and liking it.
Yeah. And I don't know if like there's a portion of that too with entrepreneurship where it's like, maybe you're not necessarily like craving shit to go awry, but your threshold for what rocks you is so much moved way, way higher that it's like, dude, all of this, I've got my reps in, like I'm Teflon towards this. Like what, throw your worst. Like, we got this. Like
I freaking love that. Yeah. It's so good. Like you just start getting hardened.
Yeah.
You know, you start getting your reps in and you're like, I'm getting stronger and stronger. Yeah. You know, so things that probably really threw you off your game early on in this entrepreneurial journey, now to this day, to your point, it's like, oh, this is just kind of another day. Like I'm gonna have to overcome it.
That's what I'm saying, of like looking at old journals of the things that I was like really worried about. I was like, oh, dude, that's cute. Like
that's cute. Like, that's cute, George.
Oh man. So I don't know. That level of perspective that's why I love it. Like going back and just checking in on.
Yeah. And like, I love this idea of like, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. To your point of like not having the victim mentality and changing the perspective.
Yeah. I mean, I think that you probably have a good reason, whoever you are, to have like something that you could say you're a victim of that. Like you probably have a good case to make there. Where does that get you though? Genuinely. And I mean this in like the kindest way. Like that place is not one that you really want to sit in. It's like, all right, yeah, you have a very legitimate case to be a victim. Now what? Like, where do you go from there? It's like,
why is this being talked about more? Cause I feel like I totally agree with you of like, why have we kind of like, we're sitting in a culture that kind of like talks about the things that hinder us from becoming what we want to become and kind of like playing a little bit more of this like victim mentality.
I think people like to have excuses for why they're not wherever they're at. And again, it's like, I don't know. I mean, that's such a complex question, but I think that there's something to be said about
Are we just soft? Have we just gotten soft, George?
No, man. I don't subscribe to that. Like, no. Like, I think it's just that people are getting distracted from like having any level of, or having like a greater level of self-respect or positive momentum, where it's like, if every time that you're bored, you look at a phone that is engineered to distract you, engineered to suck your time, and engineered probably in a lot of ways to make you feel like you are not enough by like, most of these apps are trying to sell you something. I mean, frankly, like we do a lot of sales on Hiyo through Instagram, Facebook. And like, if every time that you're opening your phone, which is hundreds of times throughout the day, in some way you're being told that you're not enough, like, then I don't know, that can start to seep in some ways. Right. And then you don't have that support or that loud voice in your head of saying like, yeah, I am going to go out and try to overcome this. Or like when some victim shit happens to you that you're like, this is going to envelop me. I don't feel comfortable or capable to deal with this. And I think that, you know, if you're feeling a little bit uncomfortable in a conversation, you look at your phone, right? If you're feeling sad, like maybe order a pizza, you know, like there's bad habits around anesthetizing issues and not addressing them, but like numbing them. And I think that probably goes into the same thing of why people want to make excuses for why they're where they're at.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately, I mean, dude, it kind of aligned pretty closely when you pulled me by the nape of the neck and were like, let's run this marathon. It was like that moment kind of made me start to think like, okay, like it doesn't matter what is going on in my life. Like it's always on me. It's always my responsibility. Like my happiness is my responsibility. My fulfillment is my responsibility. My shitty job of like why my boss sucks and like the job, like the pay sucks and like I don't like where it is and the work isn't fulfilling. All on me. And when I moved that internally, I got so much happier because you actually feel like you're in control of your life as opposed to just like on the ropes taking your lumps. And that's why it sounds like it's insensitive to say like, stop being a victim. Like that doesn't sound empathetic, but it comes from a place of like, no, it's so critical that you don't think that way. Because I think ultimately you're going to be so much happier and more confident and more capable if you don't go into that like feel good, like that little momentary feel good of like, I've been wronged and woe is me. And I deserve pity or whatever. And I genuinely mean it from like the kindest place. Like thinking that you're a victim, I think is like, it's as bad oftentimes as whatever crime has been committed against you.
That was gold. That was like a mic drop right there. Dude, that was good, man. That was really good. That might have been like, Mason, that might have been one of the best things we've heard on this podcast. Yeah, that was good, man. Yeah, that was so good. Gosh, I mean, I just feel that in my bones, man. Like what you just said right there is so true. And I would encourage any male, any female to listen to what you're saying.
Well, so like that's a great point. Like that kind of concept can feel like this aggro masculine kind of like shut up, don't cry kind of thing. And it's not that. It's not
I don't think it's that. I don't think
it's not that at all.
Yeah,
of like,
I didn't get that.
Oh, we've gotten soft. Like it's not saying that everyone's gotten soft. It's not that. It's like a plea and a encouragement to not like succumb to that line of thinking that is going to be ruinous to you. Like it is not going to serve you in the long run. And for sure, modern life, you will have a million reasons to feel like, woe was you and things didn't go your way. But the people who you probably want to be in that version of that exists inside you of like that potential, that person isn't going to, you're not going to sniff that person if you're thinking in that kind of mindset. It's only one that is like much more empowered and saying like, it doesn't matter what happens to me. Like it's my responsibility to navigate that.
I think that's so beautiful. And I think you're the perfect person to give that type of advice because you've been on the other side of that.
Yeah. I mean, you know, like whether it's sobriety or whether it's trying to lean into Hiyo and like bet on myself. And I think just in general, if you make that, for me, when I made that shift of thinking damn near everything in my life is my responsibility and it doesn't matter like the shit hands that I got dealt. By the way, I've been extremely blessed and I'm like very fortunate, much more fortunate.
Yeah, but things have happened in your life.
Sure.
And things have happened in everyone's life.
But that's it, right? Like things have happened in everybody's life and everyone could have a moment or many moments where they like fold, you know, like throw in the towel, right? And just, whether it's like a full, like throwing in the towel of like, I'm fucking out. Oh shoot. I swore. Sorry.
You're fine.
Like I'm out. Like I don't care anymore. And like, you're fully dejected, or whether it's little throws where it's like, okay, I'm settling with this partner that isn't that great, but you know, I really am afraid of being alone. So I'm not going to demand what I need from that, or it's a job, or like whatever, or it's like your health saying like, yeah, well, I'm going to throw in the towel a little bit. Like I used to care, but now I don't really anymore. Like those little moments can compound on one another.
Yeah. And there's such greatness on the other side.
Totally.
If you can kind of get a little bit out of your own way or take that leap of faith and get on the other side of that fear.
Dude, absolutely.
That's where the greatness
and what exists on that other side too is pride. And I think that pride is something that is demonized now in our culture a lot. Being proud of yourself is the best thing in the world. It feels so good. And oftentimes it is so motivating and inspiring. And it's something that you should absolutely be shooting for.
Yeah.
To feel proud of yourself. Like, and that comes from oftentimes like those little harder decisions.
Yeah. Right? And if you're one of these people that's listening right now and you're like, gosh, how do I get there? I think you spent time journaling, George.
Yeah.
Spending time with yourself, spending alone time. And I think asking yourself, what would make me proud? And just see what you write. see where you go. And then start leaning into that.
I remember giving you advice on like a particularly turbulent time in your life where you didn't know, how to navigate it. And neither did I. And I just said, think about this, go 3 months in the future and think about that person looking back and say like, do something that would make that person proud.
Yeah.
Do something, whatever you do. And I think
that was the best advice that anyone gave me at that time. Cause then it took instead of trying to please everyone, I kind of took a step back and was like, okay, what would make me proud? and broke that down and then started making my decisions aligned with what I held to be true in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I mean, I think that like simplifying things down to that decision tree like can be really helpful, especially in a world of like infinite noise, right? Where we do have so many distractions, like you can kind of lose sight of, what it is that you want to do. And if you simplify things down to like, all right, this is going to make like, I want to do something that will make me a future version of me proud. Or this is going to sound so elementary or trivial, but like this week, 7 days, I'm trying to be the best version I'm trying to be the best person that I can be. Like of George, I'm going to commit to it fully for 7 days. I can't always do that. Right. And I don't know why, like it's such a silly, like obvious thing, but it's like, okay, everything that I do just for these next 7 days, like everything, you like, just try to be the best version of yourself and see what learnings.
Can I ask what that looks like? Like, how did you break that down?
So, I mean, I think like your life is,
I think, by the way, I totally compliment you and think it's so cool that you took on that challenge for these 7 days. Like that is so in my book, that is so admirable that you're like, I want to be the best version of myself and I'm going to commit to it for the next 7 days. Like who does? Like people don't do that,
but that's an
so
easy
cool.
enough commitment, right? Like just think to yourself, like you, right? And just be like, okay, I'm going to try to be the best version of myself. Like for 7 days straight, what does that look like?
What does that look like for you?
Like from a health perspective, like I'm trying to work out every single morning. So like so far, 3 for 3, right? Like I'm going to work out each morning. Then I'm going to have like every single meal that I eat, I'm going to say that aligns with my health goals of living past 100. Like, okay, each meal, everything that I've consumed from that perspective. My phone, like I've deleted all apps other than the ones that are productive for like work or talking with family. So that alone, every time that you're kind of like just fumbling around on your phone, instead of like mindlessly scrolling or something, okay, who's someone that I could reach out to and just say, check in with them, tell them I appreciate them, like whatever. Okay, sweet. I'm like knocking off a good part of my community side of my life, right? And it also allows me to be much more focused in work. Like each day I'm trying to, organization is not my strong suit. So I'm trying to, in the morning, give myself the space to organize my day of these are the things that need to happen. This is the shit that's also on the list. And like, if things come awry or things come up and the schedule goes awry, these are the things that can't not happen, and just oversimplify that. And then I'm trying to like take a little bit more effort towards, when I get home with the wifey, like not just saying, let's turn something on. Like let's have some level of a conscious decision of how we're going to spend the evening. Right. And it's not that much different from my normal life, but just doing that. And like, it comes in the ways of like, if someone pisses me off, like, no, what would the best version of you do? Be a little bit more patient.
Yeah.
You would be a little bit more excited. And like, I've been dealing with a lot of anxiety the whole journey with Hiyo, like again, it's choosing the hard thing, and you might as well choose the thing that is potentially going to be successful. It's come with like a lot of mental health kind of challenges for me. I feel like I am always high wiring, right? Like I'm white knuckled often. And this exercise was one that was like, okay, how much of my anxiety is coming from decision trees being too complicated? How much of it is maybe not eating as healthy as I'd like, or not setting up space in my life to focus on my wife or focus on my work in a more organized way? Where is it coming from? Right. And so far, like 3 days, it's not like it's a panacea or like I'm cured. But it's like, all right, I have kind of noticed that I've been feeling a lot better, and it's that momentum that we're talking about. So
I think it also, you taking control.
It's definitely that. Yeah. It's definitely a lot more of like a, as you said earlier, offensive. Like it's not as much reactive, right?
There's something to like getting up and setting the day on your terms.
Yeah.
There's something about that that's just,
dude, even if it goes like off of your terms.
Yeah.
Like, even if you just set the day on your terms and then like, shit, well, I can't focus on that as much as I wanted to, but I have a game plan and I need to address this, and then I'll get to that.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think there's so much of that plays into not hitting snooze. I think if you can just win that battle, which I found has been one of the tougher battles for me lately, is not hitting the snooze.
I've been so bad with it. And 3 days in, baby.
Nice.
Snooze.
Nice. Well, what kind of messes with me is like, I just read so much stuff about like the importance of sleep. So then I start like justifying it in my head of like,
fully.
Like,
dude, that's the justification, man. There it is.
I have to stop. I have to stop doing that. And I there was a point in my life where I could totally tell there was a different mental mindset I was in when I was getting up every day at 5. We were living together. I was getting up just so early. And then all of a sudden I started trying to put more emphasis on sleep, which I know is great, but I noticed the mental space I'm in changes if I've hit snooze or I don't have a consistent wake up every day.
Yeah. Like I don't subscribe to the like hustle porn of like Jocko Willink of like, look at how early my alarm clock is set. It's like,
I definitely subscribe to that more than you do, but
like,
I'm fully with you that I'm not like as into it as I probably was.
It's
at one
just
point.
like, okay, like find what works for you, right? Like in that you earn no points in my book of like, oh, you got up earlier than me. Like it doesn't matter to me.
Yeah.
Right. Like Evan, my co-founder, like he works way later than I do and he sleeps in way later. And like, that's just how he works. My version isn't better than his. Like it's not, but it is about finding what works for you. And if he's sleeping in because he's snoozing and then like he's feeling super groggy as he comes in and like that work output is lower, okay, then you can talk to that. Right. And for me, like knowing yourself, dude, I'm just so much more productive if I don't hit that damn snooze button. And if I get a workout in the morning, it's like, all right, I feel good. Like checking off some momentum, checking off like some little momentum things, man. It's real.
I think it's like one of the most powerful
dude,
things
are we
in
going
the
to get
world.
momentum tattooed on us? Like after this, like what's,
we need to talk about,
I'm feeling a calling.
Yeah, we should go get momentum tattooed on us. I heard something from, I'm rereading Atomic Habits right now. Excellent. And one of the things James Clear talks about is this concept of like not missing twice. Yeah. So if you mess up, okay, all good, give yourself grace, but don't mess up twice. Dude, I love and when you mess up twice, and I think I talked about this in my 34 things that I've learned in 34 years. That was one of them. But he talks about when you mess up twice, now you're instilling a new habit, which that was new to me. I was like, oh, whoa. I always said like, don't miss twice. But then if you do miss twice, now you have a new habit. And is that habit taking you in the direction you want to go, or taking you in the direction? Is that habit taking you in the direction you want to go, or taking you in the opposite direction?
Yeah. And it's also like one of the things that I love in that list was something about like honor your commitments, especially the ones that you make to yourself. Yeah. Right. Like those ones are
self-confidence.
Like those are the most important ones. Yeah. And like, yeah, when you lie to yourself or like you let yourself down, it's like, oh, dude, that hurts so bad. Yeah. And you can acknowledge it as like, oh, give yourself grace. And that's fair. Do that sometimes, but like definitely don't get into the too cushy, too much grace being given type situation.
Yeah, I think that was like my number 2 on my list. It was the most important, have a high do-say ratio, and keep the promises you make. And the most important promises you make are the ones you make with yourself. I think it was like, that was the concept. Gist. Yeah. The gist of it. And it's so important. I think like self-confidence comes in a lot of instances is being the man or the woman that you say you are. Yeah. And I think that like why I do what I do is I'm constantly trying to prove to myself that I am who I say I am. I'm not really doing it for you. I'm not doing it for anyone else. It's like, no, like I'm proving to me that I can be the person that I want to be. Yeah. And then when I do that, I find that like I'm much more confident in all aspects of my life. to you, going back to like when we did the marathon together, is you made a commitment to me, and I feel like you saw it through because like you didn't want to let me down, and you also didn't want to let yourself down. And then once you saw like the momentum that you were able to create through doing the work and crossing that finish line, and it's like, I can do this. Like I can't keep the promise and cross this off the list. It's like, okay, what's the next thing?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I wish that I had more of like a internal motivation like you do. I think you have like this, renewable energy source of just like a fusion reactor inside of yourself of like motivation. Mine, maybe it's because like I grew up in a home where there was so much like external validation that I really do ultimately. Like it really does help me, the external motivation. So it puts it that much more important for me as someone who like just is that way. And I haven't been able to unhardwire myself, like the importance of the people that I surround myself with. Yeah. So like that is you, and that's like my wife, and that's my business partners, like ensuring that I'm surrounding myself with people that are able to, give me like almost those flowers type thing, of like, cause I kind of need it. And there's a little bit of the internal, but it's also like having that external validation from people can be extremely motivating as well.
Yeah. And like, I think choosing the right friends who want the best for you is so, so important. And also certain friends can see things in you that you can't necessarily see in yourself, and having friends in your life that want to encourage you in that way.
Yeah.
I think is so, so important.
Yeah. I mean, your checks and balances, your cabinet of people that, can kind of go to you for motivation, inspiration, talking you off the ledge, venting, whatever. Having people that can kind of help you shoulder the storm, because ultimately life isn't that much about what you do. It's more about how you do it and who you do it with.
Could not agree more. Could not agree more. Well said. This has been great.
We should do this again sometime.
we should definitely do this again. Yeah, I think what was so cool about you talking today, George, was just helping the audience, or even helping me for that matter, just think about the way I think, right? Like creating mental models in your head of like perspective is everything. And when you find yourself going down a path that might be a little bit more negative, catching that person that's like wanting to kind of play a little bit of the victim card and being like, no, I'm not going to go that route. I'm going to think about how this is serving me or how this is working for me.
Yeah.
I think that's like the big thing that I think I got from this episode with you, which is like incredibly encouraging and inspiring. And yeah, I think, I would encourage, anyone listening to set up hey, what would be 7 days of me being the best version of myself?
Like it's a pretty simple,
but it's
request,
great.
Right?
It's gold.
And I think oftentimes those simple little challenges actually are really helpful. Yeah. And then I would definitely encourage, like, write out and give yourself the space to see like, okay, what was good? What was bad? How did I feel? And things kind of change.
Yeah.
It's sweet.
I also say too, what I got from you, which is something that I'm going to do in the next day or two, is like where I'm at right now. Like, what actions could I take to make myself proud? Journaling about what would make me proud.
Yeah.
And is there anything that I'm doing that doesn't make me proud right now? And trying to change those habits.
Cool.
And then also too, like just being observant of who you surround yourself with. I think that is so unbelievably important, because I think friends bring out certain characteristics and traits, good or bad, and being very aware of the types of people that you're putting into your life. I think one of the reasons I think you're unbelievably thoughtful. I love the way you see the world. I love your perspective. But also realizing you shouldn't ask for people's advice if you don't want to be where they're at.
Yeah.
You should never ask a large person, like, hey, what's a good like workout regimen, or like, what should I be eating? You should probably go speak to someone who's super fit and works out a lot, right? So I think that is something, I don't even think we touched on that at all, but that's something I do think about, is like, things weren't going in the direction that you wanted with your life, and you actively made a decision to get sober, and in making that decision and getting sober, that created momentum. I love this like concept of you going to go play golf with your dad and like winning that morning and spending that quality time with them, and then you being sober gave you the headspace to do things that you didn't normally do. You had to get kind of creative with your time, and that kind of like allowed you to put more space into Hiyo. And it was just like win after win after win, which ultimately got you to here right now, and Hiyo is just cranking and doing so unbelievably well, and it's just little wins over time.
Yeah, it's stacking up in that momentum. It's seriously like, it's the most powerful force.
Yeah.
Like in my life, it feels like this thing that is so critical to maintain and to protect that positive momentum.
For sure.
So yeah.
Love it, dude. I love you. Thanks for being on Awesome Office. This was amazing.
We have to do this again.
We will definitely do this again, my friend. All right. Thanks everyone for listening.